Hey guys, I just wanted to respond to a recent video and a Substack article that Cameron Bertuzzi of Capturing Christianity recently put out, critiquing Gavin Ortlund's case for sola scriptura. So first, let's talk about the argument Cameron makes in his video on Gavin's supposed accidental case against sola scriptura. The core of Cameron's argument is that by Gavin's own definition, sola scriptura collapses, even if one oral apostolic teaching was preserved infallibly. He points to abortion and the Eucharist as strong candidates, notes that Scripture itself affirms oral tradition, and observes that Gavin even admits the possibility. Since Gavin can't prove all oral teachings are fallible, Cameron argues sola scriptura breaks down. Now here's my response. I don't think anyone is saying it's impossible for there to be an infallible oral tradition preserved from the apostles. What we're saying is that it's unlikely. So we don't have to prove a universal negative in order not to be agnostic about sola scriptura. We only need to show it's improbable that such oral traditions exist outside Scripture. And the two examples Cameron gives aren't really extra biblical in the first place. Take abortion. The Bible already gives multiple reasons for seeing it as wrong. Humans are made in God's image. You see this in Genesis 1:26. God forms us in the womb, Psalm 139:13. The shedding of innocent blood is a capital offense. You see this in Genesis 9, Exodus 20. And causing the death of an unborn child is punishable by death. You see that in Exodus 21:22-23. So the biblical case is clear. And as for the real presence, Paul explicitly teaches in 1 Corinthians 10-11 that the bread and wine are a participation, koinonia, in the body and blood of Christ. The same word, koinonia, used to describe fellowship among believers. These are not extra biblical traditions. They have scriptural grounding. So when you add up the unlikelihood of preserved, infallible oral traditions, plus the fact that these supposed examples are already biblically rooted, confidence in sola scriptura remains justified. You don't have to be agnostic. Now, moving to Cameron's Substack article, the charge there is basically that Gavin is being inconsistent. He accepts fallible processes in recognizing the canon, but he rejects fallible processes when it comes to tradition, which looks like special pleading. At first glance, that seems like a fair critique, but if we steelman Gavin, his point is actually modest. He's simply, at least it seems to me, he's simply saying that prima facie, written transmission is more reliable than oral transmission. Think about like written instructions versus oral instructions passed down over generations. One of those is going to be more reliable. He's not saying oral tradition is impossible or automatically worthless, just that it's generally more prone to error. And he does seem to admit that in his video. But let's push this further. Let's just, for the sake of argument, if we grant that the canon is itself partly the product of oral testimony, there's some oral testimony that some book is apostolic, then wouldn't that put the canon on the same shaky ground? Shouldn't Gavin be equally skeptical? Here's the thing, I don't think he has to be. He can consistently say that oral tradition in general is less reliable, but that some oral traditions enjoy far stronger evidence than others. And in the case of the canon, we do have that kind of strong evidence. Widespread usage, early testimony, and providential preservation. So it's not inconsistent for him to be confident in the canon while being skeptical of other traditions. The key distinction is that not all fallible traditions are equal. Some are simply better attested and better supported than others. Now, Cameron goes on to point out that doctrines like baptismal regeneration and Eucharistic language like the real presence also enjoyed widespread multi-attested support, much like the canon itself. But even if that's true, I wouldn't call either of those extra biblical oral traditions. Both of those are grounded in Scripture. They are interpretations of biblical texts that happen to gain early and broad support. So they aren't good counterexamples. In fact, Gavin himself readily acknowledges the widespread Eucharistic language of real presence. As for baptismal regeneration, is Gavin being inconsistent for rejecting that, despite its early widespread support? As far as I can see, I don't think so. As we've seen before, the issue isn't simply whether a teaching has wide attestation, but whether the evidence actually supports that interpretation. And to be clear, I'm not saying Gavin is correct in his conclusion there, but the point is that he's applying the same method in both cases. He's weighing the evidential support. That means there's no real inconsistency in how he approaches them. So in summary, we can say that fallible recognition really is good enough for identifying an infallible rule. But that doesn't mean that every tradition passed down orally gets placed on the same level. That's where the difference lies. And I don't think there's any real inconsistency here from Gavin. I hope this video helps you.